All right. Hey, everyone. 9.6 today. We are going to be on page 594. I'm going to do a couple problems. As we go into this section, this chapter, we're still in chapter 9. I mean, this lesson, we're still in chapter 9. So everything we've been doing still applies. All the factoring, the FOIL method, the whole strategy, all the steps, everything remains the same. It's just a little different of a dynamic in these polynomials. Because you'll notice that the lesson title of 9.6 is factor, and what we're factoring now is the form ax squared plus bx plus c. And so I'll show you what I mean, but usually we're used to factoring the forms x squared plus bx plus c, but now we're throwing a coefficient in there, and I'll show you what I mean. So page 594, guided practice at the top, I went ahead and wrote down the second problem, number 2 there, 4s squared minus 9s plus 5. And so I'm going to go ahead and throw my parentheses out here, get that ready. I know by looking at this sign, they're going to be the same, and this means they're both negative. All right, and then so I have this here, and instead of it just being s squared and put an s and an s here, because s times s is s squared, now I have a coefficient. I have a 4. And so it's the same thing. I just need to take into account that coefficient. And so I need to think, just like I would over here, what two numbers or what two terms can I multiply together to give me 4s squared? And I could use 2s times 2s, or I could use 4s times s. How do I know which one to use? From the very beginning, I really don't. This is where I'm going to kind of just try to plug in some numbers and maybe do a little mental math, try to work ahead a little bit in my head and see if I can maybe see a relationship with these numbers. Because I will tell you this, because I see this is a 5, and I'm gonna have to get to a 9 somehow, right? I see a relationship there with a 4. So instead of doing a 2s and 2s, I'm gonna go ahead and go with the 4s and the s and see where that gets me. All right. If what I said makes sense to you, use that strategy. Try to look at the relationship of the numbers and see if you can kind of come up with the right answer on the first time instead of having to work it out, see that it doesn't work. Because this is really important that you start checking these, because if you just get 2 sets of parentheses and factor it out and it seems to work, but you check it and it doesn't work out, then obviously that's wrong, but you thought you had it right. So you really need to check these because otherwise you're going to think it's right and it's not. But as I was saying, I see a relationship there. So if that makes sense and you can do that, then I would encourage you to do that. If you're thinking, I'm not really sure what you're talking about there, or that kind of is a little not clear to me, then don't worry about it. You may just have to do a little bit of trial and error until you kind of get a feel for it. And that's okay too. All right. But I have my 4s minus and my s minus, and now I need to factor here. And this is easy. It's a prime number. And so the only 2 factors are 5 and 1. And previously, I told you that it doesn't matter when the signs are the same, where you put them, but now it is. It is going to matter. Why is it going to matter? Because now I have a coefficient, at least in one of these parentheses. Sometimes I may have a coefficient in both parentheses, like if this was 2s and 2s. When I do that FOIL method to check it, that's going to affect these numbers here. I'll show you what I mean. So this becomes really important that we check this, okay? And that we know that there is one order, that it has to flow. So here's what I mean. So I have 5 and 1, and before I would have said, well, you can put the 5 there, the 1 there, or the 1 there and the 5 there. But if you do that, you'll get 2 different answers, because again, now we have the coefficients here, and that changes the whole dynamic of the problem. So I need to know where it goes. And again, I'm just going to kind of plug it in real quick, do some mental math, and see if that works out. So I'm going to put the 5 here and the 1 here. And so I'm going to check this now, 4s. And this can get a little tricky because sometimes your s's can look like 5s. So this is kind of a peculiar one, so be careful. I'm trying to make that more. Okay. All right. We'll pretend that you know that's an s. So 4s times s is 4s squared. 4s minus 1 is minus 4s. Negative 5 times s is negative 5s, and then negative 5 times negative 1 is positive 5. Make sure we can see that, okay? And then combine like terms, 4s squared is negative 4s minus 5s, negative 9s. Yes, it is. That's good. Plus 5. And so that's how I know that this is the correct answer. If I would have put the 1 here and the 5 here, I would have gotten something different, okay? Do it real quick. If you don't believe me, or if you're not sure, do it out and see, and you'll get something different than this. You will not get the same equation. Okay, so this is again where it becomes really important that you are checking your work, and number two, that you put the numbers and the factors in the right places. Okay, so let's do another one. Let's look at number 3. 2h squared plus 13h minus 7. Okay, yeah. So here we go. Parentheses. This sign means that they are different, and this sign means that the greater factor is going to have the positive. And so one's going to be plus and one's going to be minus. And now I have a 2h squared here. And so I know that because 2 is a prime number, only 1 and 2 are the factors of it. And then I have the h. So one's going to be 2h and 1 is going to be h. All right. Now I have my 7 there. And so again, a prime number. So now this is when you would look at it and say, but 7 and 1 are the only factors, and I can't add or subtract those to get to 13. Again, because we have this coefficient, it's going to change the dynamic a little bit. Okay, so we need to recognize that. So I'm going to plug in my 7 here and my 1 here and see what happens. 2h times h is 2h squared. 2h times negative 1 is negative 2h. Positive 7 times h is plus 7h. And right there, I can stop and see negative 2h plus 7h does not equal 13h. So I'm going to stop before I go any further. And I'm going to back up here and try to maneuver this a little bit. So I'm going to switch these two here. Put the, what I have, the 7 here, I think, and the 1 here. Let's see what that does. 2h squared. 2h times negative 7 is negative 14h. Is that right? Yep. And then plus 1, or excuse me, positive 1 times h is plus h. And stop right there. Just negative 14. That almost looks right, but is negative 14h plus h positive 13h? No, negative 14h plus h is negative 13h. So then I say, oh, well, maybe my coefficients are off, or my something is off. So I'm going to change my sign because it looks like I'm going in the wrong direction. So I'm going to make that a plus and that a minus. So let's try it one last time. 2h times h is 2h squared. 2h times 7, excuse me, is positive 14h. Negative 1 times h is negative h. Stop, check. 14h minus h is positive 13h. And then negative 1 times positive 7 is minus 7. So now I know that that is correct. All right, so again, I know that may seem like, oh my gosh, that just tried all these different things. Well, as we get practicing, you'll get used to it, but try to look at these numbers and kind of the relationship and see if you can use that to help you figure out where the coefficients and the signs are going to go, okay? So use those examples, and if you kind of got confused by that, then go back and check them out again. But I want to move on to another one that you're going to notice is a little different as well. And that is when you have a negative in front of the first term. Let me show you what I mean. The bottom of page 594, number 4, says negative 2h squared minus 5y minus 3. So now not only do I have a coefficient in front of my variable, but it's a negative coefficient. I'm not going to try to, let me get my parentheses here. Put it over here. I'm not going to try to make one of these a negative coefficient, one of these a positive. No, what I'm going to do is factor out that negative. And then that will make it easier to factor the rest of the expression, the rest of the polynomial. What I mean is I'm going to take that negative out. Actually, I shouldn't have drawn these parentheses yet because I want to rewrite this equation. When I factor a negative out, I can't just like take that negative out. I have to factor, it's just like taking a negative 1, factoring a negative 1 out. Where the numbers, the digits themselves stay the same, but remember when you have a negative that's being multiplied or divided by a number, then you are changing the value from a positive to a negative or a negative to a positive. And so if I'm going to factor out a negative, that's going to change the signs. So I'm going to, or a -1, right? So I'm going to factor out a negative and put it to the side, and that's going to change this to 2h squared plus, because that's positive now, because I factor the negative out, plus 5. Did I mess that up? Yeah, that, I don't know why I said h there. So y'all probably caught that way before I did, but that should be a y. That's so my fault. Okay, so I'm hoping now that this makes sense, a little bit more sense to you. I factor that negative out, and then that leaves me with 2y squared plus 5y plus 3. Now I'm going to bring my negative down. I'm not going to lose it, all right? And now I'm going to factor. Both signs are the same. Both are positive. 2y squared, so that will be 2y and y. And factoring positive numbers are definitely easier than doing positives and negatives or negatives. So this will be a little bit easier for us. But I see I need a 3, and the factors of 3 are 1 and 3. And I'm trying to get to 5. So I'm going to do 3 times 1. So 2y plus 3 times y plus 1. So let's check this real quick. 2y times y is 2y squared. 2y times 1 is 2y plus 2y plus 3y. Stop right there. Is 2y plus 3y 5y? Yes. 3 times 1. Good. Okay, so I know that works out. So my answer is negative, or -1 times the quantity 2y plus 3 times the quantity y plus 1. Okay, so I just factored that negative out. And when you do that, remember, it's almost like dividing each term by -1. And so that changes these signs, okay? So you're gonna see that in your work today. Not all of them require that, only when you see a negative there. Just factor the negative out, don't lose it, bring it down, and then remember it changes the sign. So I like to just rewrite the equation. That's why I did. You don't have to. You can try to do it in your head, but for me, I'm not that smart. That's a little bit much for me. So you can just kind of rewrite that if you want, and then factor that, and that's why I did that, and then don't lose your negative, and then factor it here. So you'll see those on pages 596 and 597. And the last thing I would say to you is pay special attention to numbers 23 through 37 there. You'll notice that those are a little different than the 4 through 21, because those are set to 0. And if you remember from the last few weeks, anytime it's set to 0, you're going to have 2 answers, all right? And so some of them are going to be fractions. I'm going to tell you now. Actually, you'll have quite a few that are fractions, okay? Some of them are going to be positive. Some are going to be negative. It'll vary. But give those a shot. And it's the same way. It's set to 0. Let me erase this real quick and just do an example here. Let me pick number 23. We'll just start with the first one. So 2x squared minus 3x minus 35 equals 0. So because it's set to 0, remember what I said, you're going to basically just factor it out and set each one to 0. So you're going to get your 2 factors there, different signs. The greater one's going to be negative, so bam, bam. And then you're going to factor it out like I showed you. And then once you're going to set each one to 0 and then solve for x in each one, okay? If that is a little too far back in your memory and you kind of forgot, then go back and watch those videos from last week or the last few days that I posted, and refresh yourself on that. Call me, text me if you have any problems, but take these examples, use them to help you answer the problem or solve the problems on 596 and 597. You have a couple of days to do this assignment. We're going a little slower than we usually do because of our circumstances, of course. So I want to make sure that you're really getting this. All right. So let me know if you need any more help, and I will look forward to hanging out with you guys soon. All right. Thanks, guys.